7-year-old girl helped the sick Apache elder. Next day, 200 Comanches honored her in town. You're about to witness one of the most extraordinary tales of compassion and courage from the American frontier. A story that will show you how a 7-year-old girl's selfless act of kindness toward a dying Apache elder sparked an unprecedented gathering of 200 Comanche warriors in a small Texas town. If you're ready to discover how this incredible act of mercy changed the course of history for an entire community, make sure to hit that like button right now, subscribe to our channel for more amazing frontier stories, and ring that notification bell so you never miss these inspiring tales of the American West. Now let's journey back to 1884 in the dusty town of Cedar Creek, Texas, where young Sarah Mae Campbell was about to make a decision that would echo through the ages. The scorching Texas sun beat down mercilessly on the weathered wooden buildings of Cedar Creek, a frontier town that had sprung up along the cattle trails in the heart of what would later become known as the Panhandle. It was late July 1884, and the temperature had been hovering above 100 degrees for weeks, turning the usually bustling Main Street into a shimmering ribbon of dust and heat that most sensible folks avoided during the midday hours. 7-year-old Sarah Mae Campbell pressed her small face against the window of her father's general store, watching the heat waves dance above the empty street like ghostly spirits. Her golden hair, usually braided neatly by her mother each morning, had begun to escape its confines in the oppressive heat, creating a halo of curls around her sun-kissed face. Despite the uncomfortable temperature, Sarah Mae's blue eyes sparkled with the curiosity and wonder that seemed to define childhood in this harsh but magnificent land. Cedar Creek was a town built by determination and sustained by hope. Established barely 5 years earlier, when the railroad surveyors had determined that this particular bend in Cedar Creek itself would serve as an ideal watering stop for the steam engines that carried cattle and goods between the established cities of the east and the growing settlements of the frontier. The town boasted a population of nearly 300 souls, including ranchers, merchants, cowboys, railroad workers, and the various other individuals who were drawn to the opportunities and challenges of life on the expanding western frontier. Sarah Mae's father, Daniel Campbell, owned and operated the largest general store in Cedar Creek, a sprawling establishment that served not only the townspeople, but also the countless travelers, cowboys, and traders who passed through on their way to destinations across Texas and beyond. The store was a testament to Daniel's business acumen and his understanding of what frontier life required. Shelves lined with everything from basic foodstuffs and household necessities to farming implements, weapons, ammunition, and the countless small items that could mean the difference between success and failure in this challenging environment. Behind the counter, Daniel Campbell was engaged in conversation with Mayor Thomas Whitfield, discussing the upcoming 4th of July celebration that had been planned for the following week. Despite the heat and the various challenges facing the community, the people of Cedar Creek were determined to mark the nation's birthday with appropriate festivities, including a parade, speeches, games for the children, and a community barbecue that would bring together families from throughout the surrounding area. "Daniel," Mayor Whitfield was saying, mopping his brow with a handkerchief that had long since become saturated with perspiration, "we're counting on you to provide the bunting and decorations for the celebration. Mrs. Henderson has volunteered to organize the ladies for the cooking, and Sheriff Martinez has agreed to coordinate the games and contests." Daniel nodded, though his attention was partially focused on his daughter's restless behavior by the window. Sarah Mae had been unusually quiet all morning, and he recognized the signs that indicated she was thinking deeply about something that was troubling her young mind. As a widower who had been raising his daughter alone since his wife Mary's death from pneumonia 2 years earlier, Daniel had learned to read the subtle changes in Sarah Mae's moods and behavior. "I'll make sure we have everything needed for the decorations, Thomas," Daniel replied, But I'm also thinking we should consider the security situation. There have been reports of increased Native American activity in the area lately, and while most encounters have been peaceful, we can't afford to take any chances with the safety of our families. The topic of relations with the various Native American tribes in the region was a complex and sensitive issue that required careful navigation by the town's leaders. Cedar Creek existed in an area that had traditionally been hunting grounds for multiple tribes, including Apache, Comanche, and Kiowa peoples, all of whom had been significantly impacted by the expansion of white settlement and the accompanying changes to the landscape and wildlife populations. Mayor Whitfield's expression grew more serious at the mention of this concern. Sheriff Martinez has been in contact with the territorial authorities, and they've assured us that there's no immediate threat to our community. However, you're right that we need to remain vigilant and prepared for any situation that might arise. Sarah May turned away from the window and approached the two men, her small hands clasped behind her back, in the way that indicated she had something important to say, but wasn't sure how to express it. Daniel recognized this posture immediately and gave his daughter his full attention, having learned from experience that Sarah May's observations and questions often contained insights that adults might overlook. "Papa," she said in her clear, sweet voice, "what happens to the Indian people when they get sick and don't have anyone to help them? Do they have doctors like Dr. Patterson, or do they just have to suffer all by themselves?" The question caught both men off guard, not because it was inappropriate, but because it demonstrated the kind of empathetic thinking that was remarkable in someone so young. Daniel knelt down so that he was at eye level with his daughter, a habit he had developed to ensure that their conversations were conducted with mutual respect and attention. "That's a very thoughtful question, sweetheart," Daniel replied carefully. "Native American tribes have their own healers and medicine people who know about plants and treatments that can help sick people. But you're right that it can be more difficult for them to get help when they're traveling or when they're far from their communities." Sarah May nodded solemnly, processing this information with the serious consideration that characterized her approach to learning about the world around her. "But Papa, what if one of them was really sick and needed help right now? Wouldn't it be the Christian thing to do to try to help them, even if they're different from us?" Mayor Whitfield exchanged a meaningful glance with Daniel, both men recognizing that this 7-year-old girl had just articulated a moral principle that many adults in their community struggle to apply consistently. The question of how to balance Christian charity with practical concerns about safety and cultural differences was one that frontier communities grappled with regularly. Before Daniel could formulate a response to his daughter's question, the conversation was interrupted by a commotion outside that drew all three of them to the window. A small group of riders was approaching the town from the east, moving slowly in the heat and raising a cloud of dust that was visible long before the individuals could be clearly identified. As the riders drew closer, it became apparent that this was not a typical group of travelers or cowboys. The party consisted of 3 Apache men, 2 of whom appeared to be supporting a third figure who was slumped forward in his saddle and seemed to be in considerable distress. The horses moved with the careful, measured pace that indicated their riders were conserving both their own strength and that of their mounts in the oppressive heat. Sheriff Roberto Martinez emerged from his office across the street, his hand resting cautiously on the butt of his revolver, but not drawing the weapon. Martinez was an experienced lawman who had served in various frontier communities for over 15 years, and he had learned to assess potentially volatile situations quickly and respond appropriately. His approach was firm but not unnecessarily aggressive, recognizing that hostile posturing could escalate a peaceful encounter into violence. The 3 Apache men brought their horses to a stop in front of the general store, and it became immediately clear that their mission was not hostile, but rather desperate. The man being supported by his companions was elderly, with long grey hair and deeply lined features that spoke of many years of experience and hardship. His breathing was laboured, his skin had a greyish pallor that suggested serious illness, and he appeared to be only barely conscious. One of the younger Apache men, who appeared to be in his 30s and bore himself with the confident posture of a leader, addressed Sheriff Martinez in heavily accented but clear English. "We seek help for our grandfather. He's very sick, needs medicine and water. We have traveled many miles looking for assistance." Sheriff Martinez approached the group cautiously, his experienced eye taking in details that would help him assess both the immediate situation and any potential broader implications. The Apache men were armed, as was typical for travelers in this region, but their weapons remained holstered, and their overall demeanor suggested desperation rather than aggression. The sick elder appeared to be suffering from heat exhaustion, dehydration, or possibly a more serious illness that required immediate attention. "What kind of sickness does your grandfather have?" Martinez asked, maintaining a respectful tone while positioning himself where he could respond quickly if the situation changed. The Apache spokesman looked at his companions, then back at the sheriff. "He has the burning sickness in his chest, and his breathing is like the wind through broken reeds. Our medicine man says he needs the white man's strong medicine to live, but most towns turn us away." Sarah May had been listening to this exchange with growing concern and empathy, her young heart moved by the obvious suffering of the elderly Apache man and the desperation of his companions who were trying to save his life. Without asking permission from her father or considering the potential consequences of her actions, she broke away from the window and ran outside into the blazing heat of the street. "Sarah May!" Daniel called after his daughter. But she was already approaching the group of Apache men with the fearless compassion that characterized her interactions with anyone who was suffering or in need of help. The little girl walked directly up to the horse carrying the sick elder, her blue eyes filled with concern as she looked up at the man who was clearly struggling to remain conscious. Despite the cultural differences and the tension that surrounded encounters between whites and Native Americans in this region, Sarah May saw only a sick old man who needed help. "Mister," she said in her clear, childish voice, addressing the Apache leader, "your grandfather looks really sick. Doctor, Patterson is the best doctor in Texas, and he lives right here in our town. Would you like me to go get him to help?" The Apache man looked down at this small white girl who had approached them without fear or prejudice, and his expression shifted from wariness to something approaching amazement. In his experience, most white settlers reacted to Apache presence with hostility or at best reluctant tolerance. The innocent offer of help from a child represented something entirely different and unexpected. Before he could respond to Sarah May's offer, Daniel Campbell had reached his daughter's side, his face a mixture of pride in her compassion and concern for her safety. He placed his hands gently on her shoulders, not to restrain her, but to provide reassurance and support as she continued her interaction with the Apache men. "I'm Daniel Campbell," he said, addressing the Apache leader while keeping one eye on his daughter. "This is my little girl, Sarah May. She's right that we have a good doctor here in town, and if your grandfather needs medical attention, we can certainly arrange for him to receive it." The Apache spokesman's expression revealed his surprise at this unexpected offer of assistance. "I am called Running Wolf, and these are my brothers, Stone Bear and Grey Hawk. The sick one is our grandfather, Wise Eagle, who has been a leader and healer among our people for many seasons. We have ridden for 3 days seeking help, and most white towns have turned us away." Sarah May tugged on her father's sleeve to get his attention, then whispered loudly enough for everyone to hear, "Papa, we can't let the grandfather die just because he's an Indian. That wouldn't be right, would it?" Daniel Campbell found himself facing one of those moments that define a person's character and values. As a businessman and community leader, He understood the potential complications that could arise from providing assistance to Apache travelers. However, as a father and a Christian man, he also understood the moral imperative that his daughter had articulated with such simple clarity. "You're absolutely right, sweetheart," Daniel said, making his decision with the firm conviction that characterized his approach to important matters. He looked up at Running Wolf and continued, "Let's get your grandfather to Dr. Patterson immediately. Sarah May, please, run ahead and tell the doctor that we're bringing him a patient who needs urgent care." Sarah May nodded eagerly and ran down the dusty street toward Dr. Patterson's office, her small legs carrying her as quickly as possible, while she called out, "Dr. Patterson! Dr. Patterson! There's a sick grandfather who needs help right away." The commotion in the street had drawn the attention of other townspeople who began emerging from their businesses and homes to observe this unusual scene. The sight of Apache men in the heart of their town created a mixture of curiosity, concern, and in some cases, outright hostility among the assembled crowd. However, the obvious medical emergency and the involvement of respected community members like Daniel Campbell and Sheriff Martinez helped maintain a relatively calm atmosphere. Dr. James Patterson emerged from his office in response to Sarah May's urgent summons, his medical bag already in hand, and his expression focused on the professional assessment of the situation before him. Dr. Patterson was a man in his 50s who had come to Cedar Creek after serving as a military surgeon during the Civil War, and his experience treating patients from diverse backgrounds had taught him to focus on medical needs rather than cultural or political considerations. "What do we have here?" Dr. Patterson asked as he approached the group, his experienced eye immediately assessing the condition of the elderly Apache man who was now being carefully supported by his companions. Running Wolf answered quickly, "Our grandfather has the burning in his chest, and his spirit grows weak. He cannot breathe well, and he has not been able to keep water or food in his body for 2 days." Dr. Patterson nodded as he conducted a rapid preliminary examination, checking the patient's pulse, listening to his breathing, and observing his general condition. His diagnosis was swift and professional. "This man has pneumonia, and he's severely dehydrated. If we don't get him inside and start treatment immediately, he's going to die." The doctor's blunt assessment galvanized everyone present into action. Daniel Campbell immediately offered his store's back room as a makeshift treatment area, while Sheriff Martinez helped organize the careful movement of the patient from his horse to a more suitable location for medical care. Sarah May stayed close to the action, her young face filled with concern for the sick elder and determination to do whatever she could to help. As Wise Eagle was carefully carried into the store, Sarah May noticed that several townspeople were gathering outside, their expressions ranging from curiosity to disapproval. She could hear some of the muttered comments about Indians in our town and asking for trouble, and these remarks troubled her deeply. In her young mind, the situation was simple. A sick person needed help, and it was their Christian duty to provide that help, regardless of the person's background. Dr. Patterson worked quickly to set up his medical equipment in the store's back room, which Daniel had hastily converted into a treatment area by clearing merchandise and bringing in clean water and additional lighting. The doctor's experience and professionalism were evident as he began the process of treating the pneumonia and addressing the severe dehydration that threatened the elderly Apache's life. "I'm going to need several things," Dr. Patterson announced to the group of helpers that had gathered. "Clean cloths, more hot water, and someone to help me monitor the patient's condition while I prepare medications." Sarah May immediately stepped forward. "I can help, Dr. Patterson. I'm good at following instructions, and I want to make sure the grandfather gets better." The doctor looked down at the determined 7-year-old and smiled despite the seriousness of the situation. "Sarah May, that's very kind of you to offer. You can help by keeping the cloths damp and watching to make sure our patient stays covered with the blanket." As the afternoon wore on, the impromptu medical treatment became the center of attention for the entire town. Word had spread quickly about the Apache men and their sick elder, and opinions were divided about the wisdom and appropriateness of providing assistance. Some residents supported Daniel Campbell's decision to offer help, viewing it as consistent with Christian values and basic human decency. Others worried about the precedent being set and the potential complications that could arise from encouraging Native American presence in their community. Mayor Whitfield found himself in the difficult position of trying to balance these competing viewpoints while supporting the humanitarian effort that was already underway. He spent much of the afternoon moving between different groups of townspeople, listening to their concerns and trying to maintain community unity during this unexpected crisis. Meanwhile, Sarah May had appointed herself as the primary liaison between the medical team and the Apache visitors, using her natural friendliness and lack of cultural prejudice to help bridge the communication gap between the two groups. She brought water to Running Wolf and his companions, asked them questions about their grandfather and their travels, and shared stories about life in Cedar Creek that helped pass the time during the long afternoon of medical treatment. Through these conversations, Sarah May learned that Wise Eagle was not just any elderly Apache man, but rather a respected leader and healer who was known throughout the region for his wisdom and his efforts to promote peaceful relations between Native American tribes and white settlers. His illness had occurred during a diplomatic mission to meet with Comanche leaders about establishing formal peace agreements that would prevent conflicts over hunting grounds and water rights. "Your grandfather must be a very important person," Sarah May observed as she sat with Running Wolf in the store's main area while Dr. Patterson continued his treatment in the back room. Running Wolf nodded gravely. "Wise Eagle has spent his life working for peace between all peoples. He believes that the earth is large enough for everyone if we can learn to share it with respect and understanding." Many leaders, both Apache and Comanche, listen to his words and follow his guidance. This information added another layer of significance to the day's events, though Sarah May's 7-year-old mind focused more on the immediate human aspects of the situation than on its broader political implications. She was primarily concerned with ensuring that the sick grandfather received the care he needed and that his family felt welcome and supported during this difficult time. As evening approached, Dr. Patterson emerged from the back room with a cautiously optimistic expression. "The fever has broken, and his breathing is much easier. The medications are working, but he's going to need several days of rest and continued treatment before he's strong enough to travel." This news was received with relief by the Apache men and by the townspeople who had been following the situation throughout the day. However, it also raised practical questions about accommodations and ongoing care that would need to be addressed. The idea of Apache visitors remaining in Cedar Creek for several days was unprecedented and potentially controversial. Daniel Campbell, who had been considering this issue throughout the afternoon, stepped forward with a proposal. "Wise Eagle and his companions are welcome to stay in the rooms above my store for as long as necessary. We have adequate space, and it will allow Dr. Patterson to monitor his patient's recovery closely." This generous offer sparked renewed debate among the townspeople, with some praising Campbell's Christian charity and others expressing concern about the precedent being set. However, Sarah May's unwavering support for the Apache visitors and her articulate defense of the humanitarian principles involved helped sway public opinion in favor of the arrangement. "Papa is doing the right thing," she declared to anyone who would listen. "Jesus said we should help people who are sick and treat strangers with kindness. It doesn't matter if they're different from us." As night fell over Cedar Creek, the immediate crisis had passed, but the longer-term implications of the day's events were just beginning to unfold. Wise Eagle was resting comfortably under Dr. Patterson's care. His Apache companions had been provided with food and accommodation, and the town was buzzing with discussions about what had transpired and what it might mean for the future. Sarah May fell asleep that night with a sense of satisfaction and purpose that came from knowing she had played a role in saving someone's life and in demonstrating the values of compassion and acceptance that her father had taught her. She had no way of knowing that her simple act of kindness toward a sick elder would soon trigger a chain of events that would transform her quiet frontier town and create a lasting legacy of intercultural understanding and cooperation. The next morning dawned clear and hot, with the promise of another scorching day that would test the endurance of humans and animals alike. Sarah May woke early, as was her habit, and immediately thought of Wise Eagle and how he was feeling after his first night of proper medical treatment. She dressed quickly and made her way downstairs to check on their Apache guests, whom she had already begun to think of as friends rather than strangers. Dr. Patterson was already in the back room conducting his morning examination of his patient, and his expression was much more positive than it had been the previous evening. "Good morning, Sarah May," he said with a smile. "Our patient had a good night, and I think he's going to make a full recovery." Sarah May clapped her hands together with delight, then asked if she could see Wise Eagle and talk to him. The elderly Apache man was indeed much improved. His color had returned to normal, his breathing was easier, and his eyes were clear and alert as he looked around at his surroundings. When Wise Eagle saw Sarah May approaching, his weathered face broke into a gentle smile that transformed his entire appearance. Despite the language barrier, it was clear that he understood that this young girl had played a crucial role in saving his life, and his expression conveyed gratitude and affection that transcended cultural differences. Running Wolf served as translator as Wise Eagle spoke to Sarah May in Apache, his voice still weak but filled with emotion. "My grandfather says that you have the heart of a true healer and that your kindness has given him back his life. He wants you to know that the Apache people will remember what you have done for as long as the stars shine in the sky." Sarah May blushed at this praise, but replied with characteristic directness, "I just did what anyone should do when somebody is sick and needs help. I'm glad your grandfather is feeling better." As the morning progressed, word began to spread throughout the surrounding area that Cedar Creek was hosting Apache visitors, and that a young girl's compassion had prevented a diplomatic leader's death. This news traveled quickly through the networks of communication that connected frontier communities, and its significance was immediately recognized by various Native American groups in the region. Unbeknownst to the residents of Cedar Creek, Wise Eagle's mission to meet with Comanche leaders had been part of a larger effort to establish a comprehensive peace agreement between multiple tribes and the white settlements in the area. His illness and potential death would have been seen as a bad omen that could have derailed these negotiations and potentially led to increased conflicts throughout the region. However, the fact that a white community had not only provided medical care, but had done so through the initiative of a young child, created an entirely different symbolic framework for these discussions. Word of Sarah May's actions and Cedar Creek's hospitality reached the Comanche delegation that had been waiting for Wise Eagle's arrival, and their response was immediate and decisive. Around midday, as the heat was becoming almost unbearable, a lookout posted at the edge of town spotted a large cloud of dust approaching from the north. As the dust cloud drew closer, it became apparent that it was being raised by a substantial group of mounted riders moving at a steady pace toward Cedar Creek. Sheriff Martinez was notified immediately, and he quickly organized a response team to assess the situation and determine whether the approaching riders represented a threat to the community. Using his spyglass, Martinez was able to make out details that both reassured and amazed him. This was indeed a large group of Native American riders, but they were carrying peace symbols and moving in a ceremonial formation that suggested peaceful rather than hostile intentions. "My God," Martinez muttered as he lowered his spyglass and turned to Mayor Whitfield, who had joined him at his observation post. "There must be 200 Comanche warriors out there, and they're headed straight for our town." Word of the approaching Comanche force spread through Cedar Creek like wildfire, creating a mixture of excitement, anxiety, and curiosity among the residents. However, the peaceful symbols being displayed by the riders and the ceremonial nature of their approach suggested that this was not a war party, but rather some kind of formal delegation or celebration. Daniel Campbell, who had been monitoring Wise Eagle's recovery, immediately understood the connection between the approaching Comanches and his Apache guests. He quickly summoned Sarah May and explained that their kindness to Wise Eagle had apparently attracted the attention of other Native American leaders, and that they were about to receive a very large group of visitors. "But Papa," Sarah May said with the practical curiosity of childhood, "are they coming to visit the grandfather? And where are we going to put 200 people?" Daniel smiled at his daughter's straightforward approach to what was clearly an unprecedented situation in their town's history. "I think they're coming to honor what you did for Wise Eagle, sweetheart. And you're right, that we're going to have to figure out the logistics of hosting such a large group." As the Comanche delegation approached the outskirts of Cedar Creek, their organization and discipline became more apparent. This was not a random gathering of warriors, but rather a carefully planned ceremonial procession led by prominent chiefs and respected leaders from various Comanche bands. The riders were dressed in their finest regalia, with feathers, beadwork, and painted symbols that indicated the formal and significant nature of their visit. At the head of the procession rode a man whose bearing and ornamentation clearly marked him as a chief of considerable importance. He was perhaps 50 years old, with silver hair braided with leather and beads, and he carried himself with the dignity and confidence of someone accustomed to command and respect. His horse, a magnificent painted stallion, pranced and danced with the excitement of the occasion. The Comanche procession came to a halt just outside the town limits, maintaining their formation while their leader rode forward alone to meet with the town's representatives. Sheriff Martinez, Mayor Whitfield, and Daniel Campbell walked out to meet him, with Sarah May insisting on accompanying them despite her father's initial reservations about the appropriateness of bringing a child to such a momentous encounter. The Comanche chief spoke in excellent English, his voice carrying easily across the space between them. "I am Chief Iron Hawk of the Comanche Nation. We have come to honor the white child who saved the life of our friend and brother, Wise Eagle of the Apache people." Mayor Whitfield stepped forward as the official representative of the community. "Chief Iron Hawk, I am Thomas Whitfield, Mayor of Cedar Creek. We welcome you and your people to our town, though I must admit we were not expecting such a large delegation." Iron Hawk's stern expression softened slightly as he looked down at Sarah May, who was standing between her father and the mayor, with her characteristic lack of fear or self-consciousness. "The child who saved Wise Eagle, she is here." Daniel Campbell placed his hand protectively on his daughter's shoulder. "This is my daughter, Sarah May. She was the one who first offered to help your friend, and she's been caring for him since he arrived." The Comanche chief dismounted from his horse and approached Sarah May, then knelt down so that he was at her eye level, in a gesture that demonstrated both respect and the importance of their meeting. His weathered face was serious but kind as he studied the young girl who had become the center of so much attention. "Little sister," Iron Hawk said in a voice that carried both authority and warmth, "what you did for Wise Eagle was not just kindness to one old man. You prevented the failure of peace talks that could have saved many lives on all sides. Your heart is good, and your actions have earned the respect of the Comanche people." Sarah May looked directly into the chief's eyes, unintimidated by his imposing presence or the significance of the moment. "I just didn't want the grandfather to die, sir. Anyone would have done the same thing." Iron Hawk smiled at this response, recognizing the genuine humility and natural goodness that had motivated Sarah May's actions. "Not everyone would have done the same, little sister. Many people let fear or prejudice guide their actions instead of compassion. You chose differently, and that choice has created ripples that will spread far beyond this place and this day. The Comanche chief stood and addressed the assembled crowd of townspeople who had gathered to witness this historic encounter. People of Cedar Creek, we have come to honor your community and especially your young daughter who showed mercy to our Apache brother. We bring gifts and propose to establish formal friendship between our peoples. What followed was one of the most remarkable celebrations in the history of the Texas frontier. The Comanche delegation had indeed brought gifts, beautiful beadwork, handmade weapons, pottery, woven blankets, and other items that represented the finest craftsmanship of their culture. But more than material gifts, they brought an offer of alliance and mutual protection that would transform the region's political landscape. Throughout the afternoon, Cedar Creek was transformed into a festival ground as the Comanche visitors set up a temporary camp and began sharing their culture with the townspeople. There were demonstrations of horsemanship that amazed the local cowboys, exhibitions of traditional crafts that fascinated the women and children, and storytelling sessions that provided insights into Comanche history and values. Sarah May found herself at the center of all this activity, treated with a respect and affection that would have been overwhelming for many children, but which she accepted with natural grace. She was presented with a beautiful beaded dress made specifically for her by Comanche women, given a gentle pony to ride, and invited to participate in the various ceremonies and celebrations as an honored guest. The formal ceremony to honor Sarah May took place as the sun was setting, creating a backdrop of brilliant colors that seemed to emphasize the historic nature of the occasion. Chief Iron Hawk spoke eloquently about the young girl's compassion and the way her actions had demonstrated the possibility of understanding and cooperation between different peoples. This child, Iron Hawk declared to the assembled crowd of both townspeople and Comanche visitors, has shown us that the barriers between peoples exist mainly in the minds of adults. Children see suffering and respond with kindness. They see strangers and offer friendship. They see differences and find common ground. Wise Eagle, who had recovered sufficiently to attend the ceremony despite Dr. Patterson's concerns, spoke through Running Wolf as his translator. The little white sister saved my life, but she also saved something more important. She saved the chance for peace between our peoples. Her kindness has created a bridge that can carry us all to a better future. As the evening progressed, the celebration evolved into a more intimate gathering around campfires, where individual conversations took place between townspeople and Comanche visitors. These interactions, facilitated by Sarah May's example of open-hearted acceptance, created personal connections that would last for years to come. Sarah May moved easily between the different groups, equally comfortable talking with Comanche children about their games and traditions as she was discussing the day's events with the adults from her own community. Her natural curiosity and lack of prejudice made her an ideal ambassador between the two cultures, and many of the evening's most meaningful exchanges happened because of her ability to bring people together. One particularly significant conversation took place between Daniel Campbell and Chief Iron Hawk as they discussed the practical implications of the friendship that was being established between their communities. The Comanche leader proposed a formal agreement that would provide mutual protection and support, with the tribe offering to patrol the area against raiders and rustlers in exchange for access to medical care and certain trading privileges. Your daughter has opened a door that many people have been trying to find for years, Iron Hawk told Daniel. The question now is whether our peoples are wise enough to walk through that door and build something lasting on the foundation she has provided. Daniel nodded thoughtfully, understanding both the opportunities and the challenges that lay ahead. Sarah May sees the world simply, as children do. She saw a sick man who needed help, and she didn't hesitate to offer that help. Maybe that's exactly the kind of vision we adults need to guide us. As the night wore on, and the celebration began to wind down, preparations were made for the Comanche delegation's departure the following morning. However, the agreements and friendships that had been established would continue long after the visitors had returned to their own territories. Chief Ironhawk made one final gesture that would ensure Sarah May's place in the oral history of the Comanche people. In a brief but significant ceremony, he officially adopted her as an honorary member of his band, giving her a Comanche name that translated to Healing Heart, and promising that she would always be welcome among his people. "Little sister," he said as he placed his hands on her shoulders, "you are now and forever a daughter of the Comanche nation. Our warriors will know your name, our women will tell your story to their children, and our elders will remember your kindness when they speak of the path to peace." Sarah May accepted this honor with the same natural grace that had characterized all her interactions during this remarkable weekend. "Thank you, Chief Ironhawk. I hope I can visit you someday and learn more about your people and your ways." The next morning brought clear skies and another scorching day, but also a sense of new possibilities and changed relationships that would influence the region for generations to come. The Comanche delegation prepared to depart, but not before establishing formal communication protocols and scheduling regular meetings to maintain the friendship that had been created. Dr. Patterson pronounced Wise Eagle well enough to travel, though he provided detailed instructions for continued care and recovery. The elderly Apache leader's gratitude to Sarah May and the entire community of Cedar Creek was evident in every word and gesture as he prepared to rejoin his own people and continue his diplomatic mission. "Little healer," Wise Eagle said to Sarah May through Running Wolf's translation, "you have given me back my life, and you have given all our peoples a chance for peace. When I am old and my voice is weak, I will still be telling the story of the white child whose kindness changed the world." As the combined group of Apache and Comanche riders disappeared over the horizon, heading north toward their respective territories, the people of Cedar Creek began the process of absorbing and understanding what had just happened to their community. The town's main street, which had been quiet and dusty just 3 days earlier, had been transformed into the setting for one of the most significant intercultural meetings in the history of the Texas frontier. Sarah May waved goodbye to her new friends until they were completely out of sight, then turned to her father with a question that demonstrated both her innocence and her wisdom. "Papa, why do grown-ups make everything so complicated? It's easy to be friends with people if you just try to understand them and help them when they need it." Daniel Campbell looked down at his remarkable daughter, whose simple act of compassion had accomplished more for regional diplomacy than years of formal negotiations had achieved. "You're absolutely right, sweetheart. Sometimes it takes a child to remind adults of the most important truths." In the weeks that followed, the effects of Sarah May's intervention and the subsequent Comanche visit rippled throughout the region. Other frontier communities heard the story and began re-evaluating their own approaches to relationships with Native American neighbors. The formal agreement established between Cedar Creek and Chief Ironhawk's band served as a model for similar arrangements in other areas. The practical benefits of these new relationships became apparent almost immediately. Comanche patrols effectively ended the rustling problems that had plagued area ranches for years, while their knowledge of the terrain and wildlife helped settlers make better decisions about farming and ranching practices. In return, the availability of medical care and manufactured goods improved life for the Native American communities involved in these arrangements. Sarah May continued to grow and develop under her father's loving guidance, but the events of that remarkable weekend had marked her permanently as someone special in the eyes of both her own community and the Native American peoples of the region. She received regular visits from Comanche and Apache friends, learned elements of their languages and customs, and served as an informal ambassador when questions or problems arose between the communities. As she grew older, Sarah May never forgot the lessons learned from her encounter with Wise Eagle and the subsequent celebration with the Comanche delegation. The values of compassion, understanding, and courage that had guided her 7-year-old decision to help a sick stranger became the foundation of her character, as she matured into a young woman who would eventually become a teacher, advocate, and lifelong bridge builder between different cultures. The story of the 7-year-old girl who helped a sick Apache elder and was honored by 200 Comanche warriors became a legend throughout Texas and beyond, passed down through generations as an example of how individual acts of kindness can change the world. At its heart remained the simple truth that Sarah May had discovered on that hot July day, that compassion recognizes no boundaries, that kindness transcends cultural differences, and that sometimes the most profound acts of diplomacy are performed by children who see the world through eyes unclouded by prejudice or fear. The wooden sign that was eventually erected at the entrance to Cedar Creek bore a simple inscription that captured the essence of what had happened there. In this place, a child's kindness opened hearts and minds, proving that the path to peace begins with a single act of compassion. Years later, when historians studied the successful integration of Native American and settler communities in this part of Texas, they invariably traced its origins back to a 7-year-old girl who saw a sick grandfather and refused to let him die simply because he was different from herself. Sarah May Campbell's legacy lived on in the countless lives that were saved, the conflicts that were prevented, and the friendships that were forged because one child chose love over fear and kindness over indifference. If this incredible story of courage, compassion, and the power of a child's pure heart has inspired you as much as it has inspired me, please take a moment to like this video and share it with others who need to be reminded that even the smallest acts of kindness can change the world. Subscribe to our channel for more amazing tales from America's frontier history, and ring that notification bell so you never miss these stories of ordinary people who did extraordinary things. Remember that each of us has the power to be like Sarah May, choosing compassion over fear and building bridges instead of walls. Until next time, may we all have the wisdom to see the world through a child's eyes and the courage to act with the pure love that recognizes no boundaries.